All right, we are now finished with Downfall, Conquest of the Third Reich. I played through most of the way through the entire game. I'm about maybe a third of the way through the final turn, and the Western Allies, had just crossed the 10-point victory point threshold. You can see they've got 7 normal victory points and then 3 United Nations victory points. And I believe I'm playing that correctly with the UN event card. If the Allies have the winning criteria on the event card for that particular turn, they'll get a victory point, and so they got 3 of those through the course of the United Nations event card coming out. So I think that's how that works. If they get that sort of bonus victory point when they play the event card, then it's a way for them to get to 10 points through. Otherwise, I'm not sure what the point of those victory points are, because there are instant win conditions on the United Nations victory card as well, or the United Nations event card as well. And if the Allies don't meet those instant win victory conditions, which is like they have to have Paris, I think, and Berlin or something like that. I don't remember the exact instant win victory conditions, but if they don't meet the instant win conditions, then you use if they have more of this, and I can't remember if it was more partisans or more victory hexes, then they get a victory point that's tracked by that UN victory counter, because otherwise, the normal victory points are counted by the objective track on who between the Soviets and the Western Allies has more objective hexes. And so the victory point track is like a tug of war between the Soviets and the Allies as to, whoever has more victory point or has more objective hexes will have the victory point slider essentially in their column. So throughout this game, the Allies were typically had more victory point hexes than the Soviets. I don't think the victory point token ever shifted into the Soviet side of the victory point track. One of the recommendations that I was reading online is for the Soviet player to just constantly attack every turn, because they will always have more reinforcements, which they do. They have, I think, 8 points of infantry pips that they can reinforce every turn, plus 2 armored points. And then they also have a card that will give them a couple of cards that will give them infantry points as well, whereas the OKH faction only has the 4 points. They only have 1 chit that has infantry reinforcements and 1 that has armored. But they also have a card, and they have the Fortress Europe card that gives them 4 infantry points per turn as well. So it's not as unbalanced, but the Soviets have more actual units on the board. And then I lost some elite units for the OKH early on, as well as the fact that if the Soviets get into Eastern Europe down here to Romania and Bulgaria, those factions will surrender, as well as Italy surrendering, and that's all going to remove units from the OKH faction on the East Front as well. So their overall units are going to be less than the Soviets as the game goes on, and that's only going to get worse. But the idea was that the Soviets should just attack, because they'll strip. Even if they take losses, they'll be stripping more irreplaceable losses from OKH than what OKH can replace, that the Soviets will be able to replace. My experience with that strategy early in the game was that it almost ended disastrous or turned disastrously for the Soviets, because the Soviets stripped their forces down to just 1 and 2 pip units. I weakened them so much by attacking the Germans that when the Germans were able to get reinforcements and then attack in fair weather, they actually pushed almost all the way back to Moscow. This was when the line was closer. You can see that red sort of dotted line there. I've got hair all over the board somehow. But you can see the that red sort of dotted line there. That's where the kind of where it's not where they started the campaign game. That's the Husky start if you're doing the Husky scenario. But they were pretty close. They were fairly close to Moscow, and within a hex or two, they crossed that line and were almost to the gates of Moscow on like turn 2 or 3, and so it almost backfired for the Soviets. But the advantage for the Soviets is obviously the weather is not always fair. In fair weather, German armor is better than anything else in the game in terms of modifiers and in terms of how it modifies their strength. But you pretty much attacking in snow is a little more difficult, and the Soviets have more cards in their hand over there, more of their action cards that allow them to attack and get bonuses in the snow than the Germans or the Western Allies. So the Soviets can use snow a little bit more, but nobody can do anything on mud turns. Mud turns, you're pretty much just trying to plan to do your reinforcements because in mud turns, you don't get any air support, so air has no impact, and you have a -3 modifier for mud. You don't get any armor bonuses. You don't get I think it's just armor bonuses are eliminated. So with no armor bonuses boosting your strength, you're going to be on a +1 or +2 column if you're doing everything right. But on the +1 or +2 column with a -3 or possibly more, especially if you're attacking into difficult terrain, you might not even be on the +1 or +2 column. You might be even with a -3. Those odds are terrible. You're going to lose. More likely than not, you're going to lose strength off of your units. So attacking in mud, regardless of what side you are, is just never good unless you have so many cards in your hand that you can negate the -3 modifier. But even then, you're still going to be, pretty much on an even, maybe +1 or +2 column, and those are not great either. You got to roll 7 or higher pretty much to do anything significant on those columns without taking equal losses. So mud turns, you're just trying to shift chits around to not, you're trying to either move or recruit and not attack. And then you're saving your attacks as you can for fair or potentially snow turns. So it really does force you into doing certain things at certain times, just because it can end up just being a total disaster if you try and launch an offensive on a mud turn. And you really got to consider it carefully on snow turns as well, because snow is a -2 modifier, but at least in snow, you do get a reduced armor modifier and a reduced air support modifier, where you don't get those at all when you're in mud turns. So, and that's how war works. The offensives are when the weather's good. That's usually when the cards give you the most bonuses as well. You can see here, if the weather's fair, you get a +1. So you try and run these kinds of headquarters cards and stuff. The headquarters cards will make a difference usually without whether it's the combat cards or the play before your turn attack cards that usually have big bonuses for fair weather attacks. So you're definitely trying to do that. But in terms of the Soviets, the movement of their front, they have a lot of ground to cover, so they're either attacking or they're spending their move chits just trying to catch up to the retreating German line so that they can launch attacks. So, yeah, I mean, clearly they have a number of objective hexes that they can take, and Helsinki was up there as well, which I never was able to really make a push for. I was focusing mainly on going through Ukraine and getting into Poland and East Prussia, as well as hitting Romania and Bulgaria, mainly to get them to collapse so that the OKH would lose those units. And I guess Hungary never collapses in the game, even though. So this was a big get for the Allies. They came up through Italy, took Rome. Italy collapsed and surrendered, and then they were able to break out through northeastern Italy there and get to Budapest before the Soviets could. But there was no card or anything that said, oh, if there's allies that have taken Budapest or taken any hexes in Hungary, that the Hungarian government would collapse or surrender or whatever, because there are still Hungarian units fighting for OKH side there. Unlike with Bulgaria and Romania, where they had event cards that said, "Oh, if you've taken Bucharest or Ploesti, uh, Romania will surrender." And same thing for Bulgaria. If you take any hex in Bulgaria, Bulgaria surrenders and all their units are eliminated. There wasn't anything like that for Hungary. But what it did do was create a giant block against the Soviets, because the two Allied factions, the Soviets and the Western Allies, they cannot occupy a country if there's no Axis units in that country. So once the Western Allies defeated the German units that were in Budapest, then Hungary had nothing in it except the Allied units, which meant that the Soviet units could not cross the national border into Hungary. So I guess that kind of represents first of all, is it just as a game mechanism, it keeps the two Allied factions from ending up in situations where they could end up being in each other's zocks or fighting each other or occupying the same spaces or whatever, because they're not allowed to do that. But it also does kind of abstractly represent the political situation. So this allows them to prevent the Soviets from going through Hungary and up into southern Germany or southeastern Germany, or potentially through Austria, to get more objective hexes. So it's a way of sort of blocking the Soviets and funneling them through Poland and East Prussia. But the main thing that the Allies were able to do, the Western Allies, besides taking Italy and getting the coup of grabbing Budapest before the Soviets could, was invading Norway. So this I just kind of did because I thought, well, Oslo will be a potentially easy to grab objective hex that would be that I had a bunch of extra transport points. So I just landed in Norway and took Oslo, and then realized, oh, there's a strait there between Norway and Denmark. So I can just go right into Germany through Denmark. And I did not realize that with the Germans. So I didn't have all of the fortress units that the Germans have for the Atlantic Wall over here. They were all sitting in those ports, along the French coast. I didn't have them. I had Berlin occupied, obviously, but I didn't have any of these other central German hexes occupied at the time. And so I just started streaming Allied units down through Denmark and had to rush the German units over into Germany to those objective hexes and try and stave off the Allied invasion. And I held Berlin, but the Allies were able to move quickly and get a number of 5 and 4 move chits out, and just grabbed Dusseldorf and Antwerp and Leipzig and all these other German cities that just quickly pushed them towards an auto win situation. And I hadn't even gotten the strategic bombing track. That's another victory hex that they can get with the Reich Industry hex. You can still see that's 3 spaces away from the Allied advantage, the green spaces there. So I hadn't even won that strategic warfare track yet, but didn't really need to once I was bounding around through greater Germany with the Allies. So they ended up taking most of the hexes in Germany. Never even took Paris, just bypassed it. I still did land in Normandy there. You can see the Mulberry there, just to kind of force the OKW to have to split their units to try and cover more objective hexes than what they could reasonably cover in depth. So that was a way for the Allies. But yeah, as OKW in the game, definitely keep an eye on Norway. Do not let the Allies get to that strait into Denmark, because that takes them right to Hamburg, which is just right next to Berlin. So it can be bad news for the Germans. That's really how the Allies managed to win this, is they just got loose in central Germany and were able to run away with it. So, but that didn't. I would count that as a mistake on the OKW part of just not realizing where the weakness was there for the Western Allies. And it is expensive to invade Norway. I think it was an 8-point invasion space, where Normandy is only 6. Most of these are 8. Normandy's 6, Pas de Calais is 6. So those are they try and make those more enticing, as they were historically for the invasion points. So it was expensive to go into Norway, but once I was there and then realized, oh, I can just jump across the strait right into Denmark, right into central Germany. Uh, yeah, it can be, definitely pay attention to that. But overall, really, really, really enjoyed this. It's the initiative system with the weather tracking with the initiative, and the smaller moves you make, the more times you get to move, or the more chip pulls you'll get, as opposed to doing big moves that cost a lot of initiative, like reinforcing your armies and stuff. And like, it just elegantly captures the way that actually works. That during operational fair weather seasons, you're doing a lot of moving and attacking, which doesn't cost a lot of initiative. Generally, you're doing a lot of moving and attacking, so you're doing things quickly. And then when the weather's bad, you are doing recruiting or partisan warfare or strategic warfare or what have you, that is not, moving maybe you're moving in bad weather as well, but you're also jumping big swathes ahead on the initiative track because you're doing, a 15 or 20 initiative point recruiting turn or chit. So it models the campaigning and refitting sequence of a major war like this very elegantly, I think. And then the constant the conveyor belt of event cards, constantly changing your air power, your potential die roll bonuses and things like that. That creates like an addictive, just one more turn. Oh, can I just get that one event that I really want that's going to give me reinforcement points, or that's going to give me a die roll modifier and some air cover? Am I going to get that event, or am I going to get the event that causes Italy to collapse? Now that I've taken Messina or whatever, or am I going to get the one that causes Romania or Bulgaria to collapse? Like, you want to keep playing to get those cards to have your plan unfold. And they have the planning, where you can bank chits there for planning, thinking, oh yeah, I want to do this campaign and I want to refit. So I'm going to stick a recruiting chit in my planning space and then work on my moving, or vice versa. Like, it makes you want to execute your plan to make it happen and keep playing. But it does it all. It's definitely a very gamified system, but it super elegantly and game-wise represents kind of how World War II operated, especially at least this phase of World War II, where the German collapse becomes inevitable. All they can do is and that's why the game, obviously the sides in the game are worked out the way they are, because the Germans can't win. The question is, do the Western Allies or the Soviets win? And you play as the Germans to try and stymie one side or the other. So it's just a beautifully balanced system. And the strategic warfare tracks are an excellent way of abstracting out those important things that the Allies were doing, where the East Front focus is just on, keeping the grind going and grinding down the OKH. So the OKH and the OKW have very different ways that they're playing the game, which is just fascinating. And again, in this gamified system of this chit pull and initiative track and objective hexes and strategic warfare tracks and partisan warfare tracks, it just has all these excellent little elegant little game mechanisms that just beautifully recreate, not simulate, but certainly recreate in a overall strategic sense, the flow of how the final 3 years of the war, or 2.5 years of the war, went. And they're just fascinating and engaging, and never got bored with it or frustrated with it, or never felt it got tedious. It was, every decision was interesting and fun to make, and so just a real joy to play. So definitely recommend this if you have the chance to pick it up. And I played solo. Obviously, the experience playing it opposed would be very different. Although the only hidden information is the hands of cards, so I found it pretty easy to solo because you're just going to play cards as you would build up your plan and execute it without playing like you would against an opponent, which is you don't know what they have, so you just play it that way when it's solo. So I thought it played fine, but obviously the experience would be different. I think an opposed player would not have made the mistake that I made with the OKW, not realizing that, or maybe they would, but not realizing that Oslo, if you take Norway, you can just jump right across the strait through Denmark and you're into Germany. That might not happen. It wouldn't have played out the way it did so catastrophically, I think, against an opposed player. But yeah, I was just playing catch up as the OKW at that point once I had to speed everyone over into the objective hexes in central Germany. So anyway, definitely recommend it if you have the opportunity to play it just as a light but still, I think, remarkably accurate portrayal of how the World War II, the final years of World War II played out strategically.